Today is Friday, March 24th, and I am joined by Jon Heyman, our baseball insider at the New York Post. And we're going to go around the bases. Jon, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing well, and we are less than 1 week away from opening day, so things are starting to ramp up. Teams are starting to make their roster decisions, and let's get started with, obviously, we saw the news yesterday with the Phillies. Rhys Hoskins goes down with a torn ACL. It was a tough look to see that injury happen. And what did you make of that injury? First off, I wanted to ask you.
Well, obviously, very unfortunate for Rhys Hoskins and unfortunate for the Philadelphia Phillies. I mean, to miss him for a year, that is a big loss. Fortunately for them, they have a dynamic lineup. I saw a lot of it at the WBC. They had three starting players on that lineup, which was virtually an all-star lineup. So, they have good players, still very good players, and Bryce Harper will be back too. But certainly losing Rhys Hoskins for a year is a big blow for anyone. Looking around the league right now, look on the outside. Luke Voigt is trying to make the Brewers. If he doesn't make it, that's a natural pick. I'm surprised he didn't do a major league deal. At this point, he is a major league player, and he would be a good replacement. Maybe not quite Rhys Hoskins, but he certainly has power. Similar type player. The other one would be Yuli Gurriel, who's not having a good spring with the Marlins. Doesn't appear he's going to make the team, but you never know. These decisions are always close at the end. Certainly an outstanding defensive player, hit well in the clutch last year in the playoffs for Houston, but did not have a great offensive year, and certainly is not going to provide that power that Rhys Hoskins has. So certainly a blow for the Phillies, but those are two alternatives potentially from outside. Inside, I hear Kingery is having a terrific spring. He's ditched the launch angle thing and the swing coach, and he's back to being that player they gave that big deal to right away. And I think he's going to be a productive player for the Phillies this year.
Yeah, obviously a tough blow, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Phillies decide to address that loss. You also wrote this week about the Phillies and how dangerous that lineup could be potentially, especially when they get Bryce Harper back. Can you just discuss a little bit more your outlook for the Phillies this year and how they could be an actual threat in the NL East?
Yeah, I mean, I realize they finished 14 games behind the Braves and the Mets last year, and people are thinking they're not nearly as good, but I thought they had a great winter. They added Trey Turner. I love their lineup. I think Bryce Harper's going to be back sooner than expected, maybe even as early as late May. They're going to have a full year with Rob Thompson, who did a terrific job managing them through the season into the playoffs, and certainly that run was outstanding. Nobody was expecting it. Right to the World Series where they faced a great Houston team. So can't blame them for losing the World Series. But, I wrote that in the Post that I think the Phillies look like a real threat to the Mets and the Braves. And I got backlash, not just from Mets fans, but from Phillies fans, partly due to the timing of it. Obviously, the story came out the same day that Rhys Hoskins got hurt. I couldn't foresee that. I still think they're an outstanding team. I still think they're much better than an 87-win team. I love their manager, love that lineup. Schwarber, Turner, Real Muto. You get Harper back. I think Castellanos would be better. I think they've improved the pen. They have two number one type pitchers with Nola and Wheeler. Ranger Suarez, I think he's going to be okay. And if they can get Painter back, now that's no given because he does have a UCL sprain or a small tear. No given there, but 19-year-old kid who throws 100 miles an hour, I mean, that's another potential ace. So to me, on paper at least, the Phillies look in that same area with the Mets and the Braves, and I'm picking them, and I know I'm getting backlash more from Philly than New York, believe it or not, but sticking with my Phillies pick.
Yeah, I mean, you can't predict injuries, obviously, when you write these things and you're trying to predict how the season's going to go out. But like you said, that lineup is loaded. It's going to be fun to watch how the NL East plays out. Jon, let's pivot here and let's go on to our next topic here, the New York Mets. Let's stay in the NL East. So the New York Mets already had sent down their top prospect in Francisco Alvarez to AAA in minor league camp. It wasn't expected he was going to make the team, and that happened. But then there's also Brett Baty there, and there's Mark Vientos. So there's other prospects that could potentially make the team. So when you look at those two guys, do you think both of them could make the roster, or were you going to see some more moves made by the Mets here?
Yeah, I don't think it's likely that both of them make the roster. Let's take Baty first. He's had a really good spring, and people are looking at Volpe with the Yankees, and Volpe has won that job, in my opinion. He should be the Yankee shortstop. Baty, I mean, based on his performance, he's won a job. However, he didn't like Volpe, he didn't get a lot of reps at AAA. He was called up in kind of haste last year, showed a little bit of power, looked like a good hitter. He is a good hitter. They feel, I do believe they feel that he needs more reps, both offensively and defensively. The difference is the Mets have a third baseman who signed, Eduardo Escobar. We kind of forget about him. They were going to obviously replace him with Carlos Correa if that deal had gone through, but it didn't. And Escobar is a professional third baseman, had a terrific ending for the Mets, ended up with an OPS plus over 100, over league average, or about league average, but I think a little bit over. And he, despite that rough start that he had some personal things going on with a divorce, and it was difficult. I think he's a good player, and I understand that he is the starter. Unless there's a trade made, I don't see how Baty will avoid going down to the minors and getting those reps at third base. The Mets people I talked to look at the fact that, the guys who skip AAA are like Machado and Arenado, who are basically 7 out of 8 defenders, even in the minor leagues. They're superstars from the get-go, right, and they're able to skip AAA. Other great players who were not able to skip AAA and got 300 plus at bats in AAA include Chris Bryant, who we know was there 8 days too long. He should have been up with the team to start that season. And of course, Acuna and Yordan Alvarez. And, I think it's natural that he gets some more reps. I mean, obviously Volpe, if he makes that team, will not get those big reps. And, but he has earned it, in my opinion, with the Yankees. And they don't have Eduardo Escobar sitting there. They don't have an obvious starting shortstop sitting there. So I think Baty's going to have trouble making that team. Vientos showed incredible improvement. He's kind of been overlooked. Defensively, he's been better. Offensively, as one scout told me, he's hit the big dogs. He's proven himself, but still thinks it's only about a 20% chance that he make the roster. Still, I think that's a better chance than Baty. They also have Mendick, who came over from the White Sox, who could play a role there. Some people may think he can duplicate a little bit with Guillorme, but good versatile players. So they have some veteran options, and I just don't see Baty making it at this point.
Yeah, it's a great point you bring about Guillorme too. If you think people forget about him sometimes, how great of a defender he is also, who can play multiple positions in that infield. So it's going to be interesting to see how they make those decisions with Baty and Vientos and coming in before opening day. John, let's go to our third topic here. World Baseball Classic. What a finish. What an epic at bat, that final at bat between Ohtani and Trout. So first off, I wanted to ask you about that at bat. Did you buy all the hype in the theater and how epic that final at bat was? And what was your overall impression of the World Baseball Classic this year?
Yeah, of course I bought the hype. I mean, if you could see it, if you're watching on video, I stayed in Miami. I won't leave. I refuse to leave. But I'm still here. It was great. I saw some criticism that the bases weren't loaded, or that, he didn't have an opportunity to put them
foul off a pitch. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it was pretty amazing. Ohtani's incredible. Came out of that bullpen. I'd heard the day before he was going to close that game, and he did that. You got to give the guy credit. He loves the game, loves to play, came over here for little money. I mean, the Angels have made probably $100 million in profit or savings on the deals that they've signed him to, which he had no option. He wasn't a free agent. He will be a free agent after this year. And it'll be interesting to see whether he gets 500 million or more, or whatever. But I mean, he's a gamer. He loves to play. I wonder what the Angels think that, they've ramped him up. He's obviously their ace starter. Now he throws a 1 inning, but boy, what a great inning that was to get a double play out of Betts. Oh. Some old time folks told me, Betts should have bunted. I don't know. It's Mookie Betts. They said, well, you got to get 2 hits to beat him. If you don't bunt, but I still don't think you can bunt Mookie Betts. But in terms of that at bat, to get the 3 swinging strikes, strike out Mike Trout on 3 and 2. I mean, it could have been scripted like that. It was not. It played out that way, and it was fantastic.
Yeah. And then just to wrap all of this up, the World Baseball Classic, it seemed like the fans were into it. Like you said, you were into it. I mean, can you just talk about the atmosphere of these games and the total buy-in from not even just the teams, but the fans themselves?
Yeah. Well, it begins with the players. They were really into it, right? Look at all the players that went. Our lineup was such a star lineup that McNeil and Alonso were basically part-time players. Right. in that lineup. I mean, it was an all-star from 1 through 9. Incredible. I mean, Trey Turner, a $300 million player, was batting ninth up until that last game. And you saw how he played and how into it he was. And now Alonso was into it, and so was McNeil, so was Lindor. All the players were into it. The fans were into it. It was so much enthusiasm at Marlins Park. You know, I mean, I heard some dispute over the fact that the pool in Miami, which included 3 great teams, Dominican, Venezuela, and Puerto Rico, and there was a pool out played in the, in Asia that, was Italy and Cuba came out of. Not nearly as good as the 3 teams we saw here. So it was a little unfair in that way, but I mean, from the marketing standpoint, you couldn't have beat that pool that was here. And then the finals and the semifinals. I mean, obviously, U.S. proved a lot better than Cuba, but that final match was fantastic. Japan, terrific. You know, obviously, there's going to be some complaints about our starting pitching. I give credit to all the guys who did show. Waino, incredible heart. Michaelis, same thing, fantastic. But obviously, our 10 or 12 best pitchers were not there. Right. I think it's partly about the teams, the mindset, all that. They don't want to risk injury. I don't know. I think, basically Mark DeRosa, the manager, did whatever the team said, but they wanted to keep their eye on. Certainly, I get Verlander. He's 40 years old. He had Tommy John surgery a couple of years ago. Scherzer, not 40, but pushing 40. Then you had Dylan Cease, Fried, Cole. There are a number of great American pitchers who would have stacked up nicely to that Japan team. But, I think as we knew going in, Japan was the favorite. They had 4 aces, starting with Ohtani and Darvish. But again, I don't think it's MLB. I think it's the American mindset more than anything, because a lot of great pitchers came out of MLB to perform. Alcantara was there pitching for the Dominican. You had Urias pitching for Mexico. So we didn't get those kind of in their prime aces. And that was basically, I think, the difference. Japan also had that idea of basically kind of sort of an opener where they used 7+ pitchers in that last game, right, all throwing that nasty splitter, made it very difficult. But they had obviously Sasaki, they had Yamamoto, Darvish, Ohtani. It 4 starters better than any of our starters. No offense to our starters. Give them credit for being there, but they're not that type of ace, at least at this point in their careers.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I take away from the World Baseball Classic was just seeing that Marlins ballpark actually filled up and excited with a lot of fans. It was a lot of fun to watch.
They did a nice job down there. Yeah. They really did. It worked out fantastically, and to see all the fans with the flag waving and the jerseys, there was a lot of enthusiasm for all the teams that played down there.
For sure. All right, let's bring it all home, John. Obviously, like I said, but when I started this video, we are less than 1 week from opening day. Let's talk about the Yankees and Mets locals here in New York. Give me your season predictions. How do you see this going for both of them? Obviously, there's still a ton of question marks for both teams. Just help us put this in perspective going into the season.
Well, I have them both as playoff teams. I hope nobody takes offense. I am going to pick them in second, both teams. I know it's a little bit of an upset for both. The Mets have the highest payroll in baseball, $364 million. That's the number we're citing. The Yankees, I think, are second at this point, around $300 million. So they're right on that Steve Cohen luxury tax threshold. I think they're great teams. Those are the 2 teams I saw most. I did see the Phillies, who I'll pick in the East, a few times. If someone wants to call me an expert, that's fine. But to be fair about it, I spent most of my time with the Yankees and the Mets. I didn't spend as much time with the other teams, so maybe I didn't get to see their flaws up close and personal. The Yankees and Mets are both excellent teams. They both should be in the playoffs. They both easily could win their division. The Yankees will be favored in their division. The Mets, if not favored, basically a coin flip with Atlanta. I see it as a 3-way coin flip. I think the Phillies are that good. Fortunately, lost Rhys Hoskins, but to me, they have all the elements of a champion as well. So could go 1 of 3 ways in that tough NL East. Yankees, I think should be them or Toronto. I only saw Toronto 3 days also. I tried to see them as much as I could as a main competitor. Yeah. I thought they were outstanding. So I'm going to go with the Blue Jays and the Phillies to win the division, and the Yankees and Mets as wild cards.
All right, you heard it here first. Jon Heyman got the both teams making the playoffs. Interesting to see how those divisions are going.
Yeah, you heard it. I wouldn't go run to your bookie or I heard it here first, but these predictions, anybody can make them. So
Listen, this is what makes it exciting is
yeah,
we can't
yeah.
wait for that first pitch opening day, just seeing those lineups. Obviously, like we said, we went over the Yankees and Mets. Still got to make decisions on their opening day rosters and lineups. I think a lot of fans are going to be paying attention to how those moves work out. But John, I appreciate you as always going around the bases with us, and hope you have a good one, man.
All right, Ryan. I'll see you next week.